Welcome to the Feb 2025 edition of the RC07 monthly webinar series. This month, we are happy to feature one of our volunteers and active members, Professor Anju Gupta, who is currently working as an Associate Dean Liberal Studies at GECRC University. Uh, Professor Gupta has 10 research papers in UGC and international peer-reviewed journals. She has book chapters in 4 books, 2 under publication now, and has authored 2 books. She's currently a board member of RC26 of IPSA, which is the Human Rights Committee, and she's volunteering with us, as I mentioned before. She is a life member of the Rashtriya Samaj Vigyan Parishad and a former executive member of Indian Society of Gandhian Studies for 3 consecutive years. She is also a life member of the Indian Political Science Association and co-edits and writes the blog for RC26. Professor Gupta will speak today about feminist movements and their role in increasing women's political participation. I will hand this over to her. The format for this, if you are new to us, is that she will speak for about 20 to 30 minutes, and then we will have a short discussion. I'm not the normal host of this series, so I've forgotten the script. The script actually begins with an introduction to RCO7 for those who are new. This is a research committee of the International Political Science Association that began with a focus on women in developing areas and then has gone through several, I suppose today we would say, rebranding exercises, so that it is now about women in politics in the global south, very broadly construed to include politics, livelihoods and development, human rights and law, as well as women, peace and security. But I will stop there and hand the floor over to Anju.
Thank you, Swarna, and a very good evening to all of you. And thank you, Swarna, for giving me this opportunity to speak about, a topic which is very near and dear to me. And I have been basically writing about the mobilization of women, especially the feminist movement, especially in India. So, this topic is, of course, very much interesting also. And recently, I have been researching into, when I was going through some of my, I was writing few papers. So, this uh, gave me another perception about the feminist movement that happened in India. So before starting, about the role of feminist movement in India in mobilizing women for political action, let me brief you, a little about the history of the, how Indian feminism uh, is basically different from the Western concept of feminism, and how feminist movement in India have played a pivotal role in transforming the landscape of women's political participation. So, the Indian feminist movement, they have constantly worked to raise the awareness about women's issue, empower them to voice their concerns, and ultimately drive their action engagement into the political sphere. When I'm talking about how Indian women movement is uniquely, it is different, how it is different from the Western feminism. Basically, Indian women's movement, they generally focused on securing equal political, economic, social, rights and opportunities for women within the specific context of Indian society. And its trajectory and characteristics have, diverged from the Western feminism due to distinct historical and cultural factors. For instance, the concept of female power, while existing within the patriarchal framework, is often integrated through religious symbolism, granting women traditional cultural spaces and visibility across various social strata. In fact, if we, if we understand, the Indian feminism, it is also the understanding of Indian feminism is also different, because the individual within when we talk about Western feminism, Western thought often emphasizes on competitive self-reliance and individual liberty. In Indian culture, the Indian culture prioritizes the Indian individual's role within the largest social, structure. Within, it is more collective. It is based on cooperation. So the key distinction lies in the origins of the Indian women's movement also, which is initially propelled by male social reformers, with women subsequently joining and shaping its direction. So, this challenges the simplistic Western feminist narrative of the universal male female dichotomy characteristic, characterized solely by oppression. So, in India, men actively initiative crucial social reforms, including when you say about the abolition of sati, the prohibition of child marriage, the legalization of women of remarriages, the promotion of women's education, and securing women's property rights and legal standing in matters like adoption. So, therefore, Indian feminist movements must be understood through its own specific historical and cultural lens, recognizing the complexity in a complex interplay of gender, tradition, and reforms. When I'm talking about how, it was initially propelled by the male social reformers, I can give you an example. Like during the colonial era, social reformers like Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Ishwar Chand Vidyasagar, Jyotiba Rao Phule, they spearheaded efforts to improve women's life. Roy, or you all know that Ram Mohan Roy advocated, led the abolition of sati, while Vidyasagar championed widow remarriage. And we had even few warriors like Rani Lakshmi Bai, who courageously, she stood against the British rule for, for exemplifying the women's strength and determination. So, this is the basic background of my, this topic today. No, let me start with something, the historical, how historically we were so much empowered, that women were giving gender equality in Indian intellectual traditions. If we talk about predominantly about in the tone of social philosophy of ancient Indian literature, we often get the picture of the Ardhanarishwar, that is women who's different but equal other half of men. So, she was highly worshipped, and it was believed that God had created both men and women equal. They are complementary to each other. Even in many Hindu texts, also, we have higher status given to the women. If we talk about, Indian mythological or Indian, gods and goddesses also, we often say Radha Krishna, Sita Ram, Lakshmi Narayan. Even in Ved Vyas also, when he talks in Mahabharata, he tells the story of how the Kauravas, they fall because of the humiliated Draupadi. In the Vedic society also, there were religious ceremonies and tribal assemblies. They were in which women participated actively, and they were given high places. Even in Rigved, Upanishads, there are several names of women intellectuals like Gargi, Maitreyi, Lopamudra, Apala, Chipa. So the Indian intellectual text also, they gave a very high position to the women. But basically, the deformity, as the time passed, and because of the invasions, several invasions of the Mughals, the Europeans, this distorted the status of women, and it started deteriorating. And in ancient India, we had patriarchal system which was quite prevalent, but still women enjoyed the position of respect and reverence. But when because in the medieval period, the status of the women deteriorated very much. So the real change after, in the when we like, I'll talk about the pre-independence era, but the real change in the status of the women was brought about after independence. And there are several constitution act in articles, also in the preamble, in the fundamental duties, directive principles. There's a principle of gender equality which is given to all the women citizens of India, where the article 14 talks about the right to equality, which article 15, 15.1, 15.3, and many more like that. They have given the equal status to women. And basically, when we talk about Western feminist theories, that it has been divided into phases. The first phase was basically giving the suffrage rights. So we never fought for that. When we talk about the feminist movement, women never had to fight for their constitutional rights. It was given to them since beginning by the Constitution of India. Subsequently, there were many laws also which were passed by the Indian legislature to, after the independence, to improve the status of women, to address their problems, to address women's unequal status. The Dowry Prohibition Act, if we talk about, the Commission of Sati Prevention Act, the Immortal Traffic Prevention Act, eve teasing, which is a very new legislation, sexual harassment, domestic violence. So, although the status of women in India was subjected to many great changes, but basically women were given and guaranteed equal rights with men, especially mainly of equality, dignity, freedom from discrimination. So, this is the picture, one side picture. But for getting all the other rights according to the circumstances, according to the changes which happened, there has been various movements which gave further, the new kind of rights which were not given to, or it led to the thinking of a new, extremely a new scope for new rights. When we talk about, like sexual harassment, uh, uh, rights like Me Too. This was the latest movement, Me Too movement. So because of the evolving journey, and because of the female education, because of their participation in various movement, the it has made, there has been a remarkable change in the rights, and in the in the development of the position of women. Like, if I basically if I uh, basically if I divide the the eras after, the how women participated in the post independence era, there I can divide it in three phases of women's movement in the post independence era. The first period can be divided from 1950s to 1970s. That was the period when that was the time of nation building, and this is the time when Indian constitution was framed. So at that time, it was focusing largely on legal constitutional framework, and providing fundamental rights. And the state played a very significant role in women's welfare development. And there were also criticism of states welfare approach, which sometimes reinforce the, a kind of, what you can say, a different view of women, where sometimes it also challenged the status which she enjoyed. And during this time, many women participated in building new nation. But that was the time when we were just adjusting our our position. The female, we since we got our the constitutional rights, so we were trying to just trying to enjoy that right, but not in the true sense. The basic, the change which the enormous change or the radical movement, women's movement, came in around 1970s to 1990s era. And there was a complete shift from a welfare approach to a focus on women's rights and empowerment, especially when issues like domestic violence, issues like rape, issues like dowry deaths, issues like economic inequality and political participation evolved. This phase was marked by the growth of women's organization and activism, with a strong emphasis on raising awareness and demanding social change. This time also saw, the rise of movements like Chipko, anti-Eric movement, where women took center stage. And especially this was also the time when issues where women groups, they have emerged with wide ranging issues like health law, access to land and other productive resources, environmental degradation, media, violence, alcoholism, trafficking. All this was a time when there was wide ranging issues. They provided space for participation of different groups of women. So these agitations, exemplified the vital role of women played, and vital role played by the women and the women organization. There were certain social issues also which were taken by the women in through social movements for mobilizing women. See, these women movements, they had these women led movements were they emerged as due to some social problems. And these mobilize uh, basically it started it started to generate uh, a national consensus on social issues, and it was able to bring about a greater unity among women of India across political, social, and cultural platforms. If I talk about certain landmark movements where women played a very visible roles, can be the Chipko movement of 1973, which happened in Uttarakhand, where in the leadership of Gandhian community workers. They waged a struggle against the arbitrary felling of the trees. So the women of this region evolved a creative method to protect the trees from the excess of the contractors, and this is called the Chipko movement. And the female who led this movement was Gora Devi. So this was one of the I think very prominent movement which was led by the women. In another movement was in the state of Maharashtra, when women activists and women intellectuals involved in the progressive movements, they took the initiative in forming united front called Anti-Price Rising Women's Committee, and they organized and directed action against those who created man-made scarcity of essential goods. So these in this movement, thousands of poor and lower middle class women, they joined. So this struggle was very unique because it displayed the ability to reach out the women of different class, different backgrounds. If we talk about Narmada Bachao Andolan, which was also led by a non-governmental organization that mobilized tribal people, farmers, environmentalists, and human rights activists. So this was also, their mode was including, campaigns like hunger strikes, mass media publicities. So this attracted and created a mobilization in the in the other strata of the society also, especially in the lower and the middle class women. Then another movement which was very popular was the anti-liquor or anti-arrack movement of Andhra Pradesh, which witnessed more than 4,000 women uniting and blocking the arrack auction in Andhra. It was also a historic chapter in the history of Indian women's movement. And we know campaigns against violence, women productive rights, women fight against unjust family laws, which resulted in legislative reforms also. And it also led the parliament to table up for the deliberations. So these movements, they created you know a lot of awakening, lot of consciousness in women. And one of the most important example where women played a very important, women's movement played a very pivotal role, was during the communal rights of 1992 and 2002 in Gujarat. And these type of movement then led to new leadership of youth, new women joining, which was very indifferent to politics, but they were quite discontented about the patriarchal biases, so they started openly questioning all the hierarchical structures. Then one of the contemporary women issues and the movements which while after the post independence era was started. There was a voluntary organization, and uh, which was called Gulab Gang, if I'm not wrong. So the some so these there it was in a small town of, a small place of Bundelkhand region of Uttar Pradesh. This Gulab Gang, Sampat Pal Devi was the founder of Gulab Gang, and it was an Uttar Pradesh based social organization which worked for the women welfare and empowerment. So Sampat Pal started the Gulab Gang with a group of women from her village to fight for various forms of social injustice. So this developed into an organized women's movement with 10,000 members spread over several districts of Uttar Pradesh. And till date, Sampat Pal has recruited, I think, estimated uh, around 4 lakh members to join her cause. So, they used to arm themselves with the bamboo sticks. They used to come up wherever, they are required, and they stand up against any violence. So, similarly, in the social norms, if we talk about the ban of the entry of, this Sabrimala. So this, in even in the Shingnapur temple, it was challenged by a high voltage campaign of women activists, which allowed women to enter the sanctorium, breaking the traditions which were followed for several decades. And it led to the High Court to held that it is the woman's fundamental right to go into the places of worship, and the government is duty bound to protect it. So the debate over the issue of this Shingnapur temple, so it created a massive awakening. If, I'll just quote you one example from Rajasthan also, which is also one of the prominent example of Sathin Bhavri Devi. She was an Indian Dalit social worker from Bhateri, and she was allegedly gang raped in 1992 by a high caste men, and to because of her efforts to prevent a child marriage in their family. So this also created a widespread and national and international media attention. It became a benchmark, a landmark episode of India's women's rights movement. She was invited to United Nations Fourth World Conference on Women in Beijing, and she became a symbol of courage and conviction. Although what happened lastly, she was murdered, and still, and one it could not one could not find out what happened to her. And these things are these things are the other part of the story. But the 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 awakening, the attraction which these women's movement caught worldwide is very remarkable. Even if you look at the Muslim community, if we talk about, they also raise their voice on triple talaq issue. It was of course it is one of the landmark decision when Saira Bano, a mother of two, she was one of the victims of that tyranny of triple talaq. And this was also, she gave a petition to the Supreme Court, and later on it was declared unconstitutional. And there was again, it became a historic decision for the first time, because even the rights of the Muslim women, in the name of Islamic practices, it was raised wider. So today the movements in India, they have become a mass movement, which even incurred pressures on the government to take policy decisions. They have crossed the boundaries of urban, rural, rich, poor, men, women. Even if I'm again, I quote an example of Aruna Roy. She joined, leaving civil services. She joined as a social worker, and then she worked in a place called Telonia. She struggled for the enactment of India's right to information, and she was the leader of the Right to Information Act movement in India. If we talk about Irom Sharmila, who's known as the Iron Lady of Manipur, so she became the icon of public resistance. So these were the movements which were initiated by women. Even if we talk about movement against violence against, the most talk the most the most what you can say, uh, it led to it showed the power of public protest, was the gang rape which happened in Delhi, which is called the Nirbhaya case, where women led protests. It happened across India. This movement significantly raised the awareness about sexual violence and led to amendments in the rape laws. And there are ongoing movements which are continuing to. Recent example, if we talk about Kolkata. So, these movements continue to fight against the sexual harassment and other forms of gender based violence, and they have contributed to a shift in the societal attitudes and increase in legal protections. There are movements about the economic justice also. Organizations like Self Employment Women's Organization, which is called Save Association, which is called Seva, they have empowered women in the informal sector. They have been advocating for their economic rights and providing them with the support and resources. So these movements have contributed to greater economic security for women and their families. The self-help groups, they are also, they are led, many of the self-help groups are led by females, and they have a large force in modern India, then they are often, these groups provide economic empowerment to women in the rural areas. These movements demonstrate the power of women's collective action to bring about political and social changes. The recent, when I was talking about these movement, the recent movement which I recently talked about, the Me Too movement, although the foundations of the Me Too movement was basically Western, but taking the, this movement took speed up when, because of the social media influence in India, this Me Too movement uh, was of course, we know the special case of Tanushri Datta, who accused Nana Patekar for his inappropriate behavior, and this became so much popular that list of females came forward to discuss their sexual assaults which happened to them, maybe in their workplaces or somewhere else. So the point which I'm trying to highlight is that we see that women's movement, even in the recent times, they have taken the form of mass mobilization. They have created awakening. We are talking about, we are talking about new types of movement. Probably we all are equipped with our constitutional rights. We are given, we are given all the rights, but still, there has to be, there are still a long way to go, and we have to exert, these type of movements are exerting pressures on policymakers to incorporate women-centric issues in their political agenda. So change is gradually happening, and I think we are surely going to have a better tomorrow. And of course, these movements have created a lot of awakening. Thank you so much. I hope I'm able to, present, and it was a long journey, but still these are the movements which can be a landmark movements, and then they then can create a good foundation for the other movements. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Gupta. Uh, the floor is open for questions and comments. You can either leave your comments in the chat, or given that it's such a small group, you can raise your hand and just jump in. And yes, Jitu.
Oh, thank you so much, Professor Gupta. That was like, a nice, refreshing, refresher course kind of a, short module, intense, which you took us through the start to the end to the present regarding the feminist movements in the political space in India. I just wanted to know, considering that you've talked about the power of the social media in mobilizing women politically as well, how do you navigate the differing narratives regarding women empowerment? Uh, that it can refer to historical aspects that the media is using. Just for an example that I'm giving is, we see differing courts coming out with differing interpretations of what a rape can constitute within the familial space, whether rape by a husband is actual rape or not. There are different, there are differing judgments or differing interpretations that come out. So how do you navigate that? And another similar example is the case that you would have read about, how the blouse for a sari blouse was, politically, there is a political history to how the blouse came to be a part of the sari, especially in the south part of India. It was brought on by the British, but then, there were case stories about how, lower caste women had to fight against the breast tax by cutting off their breast as well. So how do you do, yeah, navigate these differing narratives? Or is that, like, as history progresses, you come to know more about some things and then you take it forward?
Well, Jitu, see, my perception is that you are talking about the judgments. No, you're talking about the judgments the court has given in different decisions. So I think, although my perception is that uh, things depends on how that thing has been perceived. Supposing, if I just give you an example of Sabrimala. Okay, just giving you an example. See, it was a high voltage case, and it was, once the judgment came again, then there was a petition filed. So things depend on, the social strata also, the peer pressure also, and the circumstances also. Because, then there are cases where there has been a strong decision given by the court, but there are cases and decisions which were somehow biased also. So, again, this petition has been filed, still is it's prolonged. So I think that is why I said long way to go. But since we are taking, care now, these things are taken best care. Like, we were, as you said, sari ka blouse. These are not the considerations now. Now your consideration would be maybe your menstrual health, not this. So I think things are changing and evolving as the time is, the kind of awakening a female, that kind of exposure the female is getting.
Thank you.
Yeah, come in, Uditi.
Yeah, so basically, my question is that I mean, women were mobilized for movements like the Quit India movement and the Telangana movement as well. However, there was always this idea of Bhadra Mahila and only a certain kind of upper or middle class femininity was acceptable. Like you mentioned, I mean, different sections of the society did come together, of the society as in the women community, most importantly, did come together. But there was always an effort to erase feminities that were not aligned with the image of women that reformers and revolutionaries wanted to paint. I just wanted to understand how this approach has perhaps manifested into modern day feminist movements in India.
So your concern is that how, this thing has changed, the Bhadra Mahila concept, and, you know if you are participating, whether you are a Bhadra Mahila or not. But don't you think these things have been changed? There were preconceived notion that white is beautiful, black is not beautiful. But again, that feminist theory came, the black, the black feminist theory came. So things, I think, gone are the days when women participating in any revolutionary movement was not perceived as Bhadra Mahila. The things are changing. Otherwise, the middle class and the lower class women would never have come out of their houses. You can see, I can give you an example. I'll just give you an example. Few days back, just where I live, there was a movement against a liquor shop. Okay. And it was led by all females, because that is an area where most of the, working class lives. And that was given ample, publicity. It came out in the papers. So I think manifestation is changing.
Thank you so much.
Other question, Avinash?
Ma'am, just I want to know that can you just highlight your views upon marginalized women and their role in political participation in India? And when you see that political participation, then would you talk about empowerment in global South and South-South this cooperation movement and all?
So I think South is very. I think women in South are very empowered, because most of the, if you see, most of the head of the states Whether you talk about Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, anyone, females, they have given, the South has given most of the heads of the states. So I think we are quite fortunate.
So, ma'am, you mean to say that lead in South in terms of women empowerment, right?
Yes, I do.
I have a question for you, Anju. I want to
Yes,
ask,
yes, ma'am.
your title says feminist political organization on the one hand and women's political participation on the other. Now, to say that women's movements, feminist movements, mobilization on the ground have either promoted or not promoted political participation, this is already correlation. It's hard to establish a direct causal line unless we say that X organization is training women and then it's actually walking them over to political parties and getting them tickets. So in your conceptualization of your research, how are you seeing this connection that we are maybe missing?
We are.
That we may be missing. You're seeing something that I'm missing. So what are you seeing and how, where is that line? Can you map that line for me? From all these movements, you've given us a lovely, Jitu's right, a lovely short synopsis of women's histories. And then on this side, you have patriarchal political parties. So यहाँ से वहाँ का सफर, the journey from here to there, where are you seeing it happen?
Swarna, I think because of the passage of women's legislation, the Parliamentary Reservation Act, and I think we are being empowered. I mean, you can see that, yes, I can say that still the progress is low, but still, if you see, we have female chief ministers, we have, we had been a female prime minister. So I think the from historical to till now, if you see the journey through these female-led movements, the subject is being changing,
Hmm.
and the policymakers are recognizing these ever-changing subjects.
Policymakers or political class?
Even the policymakers, even the political class, had it been not, then I don't think the condition of women and even in politics, although I do agree with you that still a long way to go, because the most of the political parties are male dominated parties, but still, if we look at the parliamentarians, they are coming up with new issues. I can give you an example, lot of parliamentarians coming up with new issues. So I think the journey is fruitful, although previously, of course, it was slow as compared, but still, according to the participation, according to the all these movements, the policymakers and the political parties are now rethinking
Hmm.
in giving uh, prominent roles to women. Even these movements, they have created lot of political buzz.
Yes, but I'm actually going to push you because I want to ask you about what we used to call widow orphan syndrome in the study of women in politics. That typically the women, these positions that you're talking about, prime minister, chief minister, president, um, there is a tendency for people to inherit upon the death of a parent, or the death of a husband. And so the journey of women from the grassroots. For example, one of our members of parliament from Tamil Nadu actually began because she wanted a pipe or something laid in her village. So just annoyed at about the time 24, 25, when she was eligible to contest panchayat elections. She contested her panchayat election. From the panchayat to parliament, she's had an unusual journey. But for a lot of women, that journey is impossible unless they are within that circle. And uh, I think I want to share your optimism, but maybe I'm just jaded and exhausted from looking for reasons to be optimistic about this. It's very unusual. A Jyotimani is very unusual. And I don't know if she's possible in many other states. So that's why I'm pushing you on this, Anju. Professor Gupta's had connectivity issues throughout the session, so perhaps we should take it that she's been disconnected and call the session to oh, she's joining again. She just messaged. I will take a moment to do a commercial for our next speaker, also from India. This is Professor Promad Roy Chaudhary from Kriya University, and she will be talking about women in the Trinamool Congress. And so I invite you to join us on March 19th, 5:30 p.m. We will put a poster out and all of that. And those of you who are not members of RC07, if you are members of the Indian Political Science Association or of IPSA, you're welcome to join our research committee, whereupon you will be part of our mailing list. And she's back.
So sorry, this is...
No, hota hai. No, I was just asking you, I was just citing the example of one of our MPs from Tamil Nadu and saying that her panchayat to uh, parliament journey is extremely unusual because she has no family in politics. She's not from an industrialist kind of background. She's not a professional. I think she's frozen again and gone. But I think this time we won't wait. We will close because we have a track record of finishing exactly on time. So you have the pitch link just now. Uditi has just posted it. And earlier on, you have a link to our webpage, rco7.ipsa.org, and you can follow us on Twitter at ipsarco7. So we will thank you very much for being a part of this conversation, and we will see you. This recording will be online in about a week. We will see you next month. Thank you.